Shut up when I'm talking to you. You hear me? Answer me. That's what an attachment wound can look like. IRL. When you tell people to do something, then you get mad at them for doing it. That's a sex and love issue. That's an attachment wound in real life. It's not just blindly. It literally can look like so many different ways that we abuse each other when we don't mean to. We just want to love each other, but we don't know how. And that's what nervous system literacy teaches you. When you can address your attachment wound at a foundational level, the whole world changes, because how you do anything is how you do everything. And I always say, I like to use my youthfulness like my white privilege to help other people. Welcome to another episode of the Me IRL Pod. I'm your host, Lauren Friedman, also known as Not Another Healing Asshole, also known as the Trauma Translator, the Suicide Whisperer, and more. Today, I'm really excited to talk to you about what is sex and love addiction in real life, because it's not what you think it is. It's actually really not. It's actually an attachment wound. It's part of how our nervous system is configured to engage with others, whether it's personal, romantic, in business, with family, or with friends. And when you can address your life at an attachment wound level, the entire world opens up. And I know that firsthand. My experience is what I'm going to be sharing today. I started dating recently. It's part of this platform, dating post-divorce, dating without disaster, but also just trying to find ways to have healthy engagements. And it's really interesting because I started dating about officially after breaking 2.5 years of celibacy, abstinence, in honestly like the best way that I could have broken it, in the healthiest way possible. It required me to have an ego death for sure. And it's interesting because when I started dating based on nervous system literacy, based on reclaiming my power after years, after decades, after lifetimes, right? This doesn't just live in our bodies, but it's epigenetic, meaning it lives in our genes and it becomes pronounced through environmental factors with stress over decades. When we find healing, we actually heal up to 7 generations behind us. And my grandmother, who escaped the Holocaust, dealt with these same types of issues. My father, who grew up in the projects on welfare in East New York, also dealt with some of these types of things. And one of the reasons I'm in this situation is because of my mom. My mom was abused as a child. Hurt people, but healing people help others people heal. And when you're able to reframe those things and be able to retrain your nervous system and rewire it for success, everything changes. And it all starts with the power is in the pause. And I always talk about the Camuso shift, but I also use myriad practices, including movement as medicine, rest as medicine, stillness as medicine, mantras as medicine. I use recess. I actually love the way recess feels. It has L-theanine in it. I don't know if I'm saying it properly. Adaptogens that helps your body deal with stress better. I use many different things, as we've discussed in other episodes. I use routine to stabilize my blood sugar and make more conscious decisions. Again, sleep, same thing. So when we think about regulating our nervous system and making decisions out of safety versus desperation, it all starts with understanding our shadow, understanding our attachment wounds, understanding what's the unconscious decisioning that we keep replaying over and over and over again, that we were conditioned into being this way. I have videos that I'm going to share at a later date. I know that I mentioned on previous episodes, or maybe I didn't, that because of the situation that happened in my mom's estate when she died in 2019, I didn't have access to many of the sentimentals that I wanted. And I only have one video. I thought I had the sentimental things, but I don't. And I only have one video and it's only like 10 minutes combined, but it actually depicts a really good way that you could see how I was conditioned into this, how the savior and the scapegoat is something that my body knows so familiarly that I chased it over and over again, whether it was in my marriage with my ex-husband's family. I was, the concept that we've discussed before, right? My ex-husband's father called me a concept. He's like, how can you exist? And when you depersonalize someone, you could easily manipulate them and devalue them because they don't exist as a person, right? I'm a concept. I'm not a human to them. So it was really easy to abuse me and to take advantage of me and to defraud me and to attack me, because to them, I wasn't human. I was superhuman. My mom was my first original abuser. And lots of women that are highly successful, that are high functioning, lots of men too, struggle in these same ways because our parents unintentionally, unconsciously abused us, even though they wanted to love us. But their nervous systems were conditioned to treat people this way. That's all they knew from an epigenetic level, right? My mom's was abused, so she abused us, but she didn't physically abuse us, so she didn't think that she was abusing us. We need to also reframe what abuse is because our body can't distinguish between mental stress and physical stress. So whether we're being emotionally abused or physically abused or mind in some way, it all reads as stress to our body. And when we're able to our lives in real life through nervous system literacy, the art and science of connection, you can literally biohack an embodied comeback. And you could break those cycles of dysfunction that keep us stuck in those same things over and over and over again. I was in therapy since I was 5 after my dad's first suicide attempt. Both my parents were therapists, and nobody knew until I was almost 40 when I was having flashbacks and wetting the bed and brain fog. And I barely could function, that I was in undiagnosed lifelong survival mode. But my biggest problem, when I was able to tear apart all the layers and get down to the bottom and the foundational level, was an attachment wound. And many of us struggle in these same ways, especially high performing, highly successful, high achievers, truly, because we're all motivated by the same unconscious decisioning that keeps us survival mode as a superpower, that keeps us highly successful. But eventually, those same coping mechanisms, our bodies build up a tolerance and they can become deadly over time. In this episode, I want to talk about what does sex and love addiction look like in real life? Because as I mentioned in the previous episode, I had a date with this Harvard educated physician, and he's very somatically trained. He understands that, but what he doesn't understand is attachment wounds. And attachment wounds keep us in shame and keep us in these same cycles of dysfunction. I saw it happen in my career. I kept begging over and over and over, forcing my way through, plowing my way through for success. And I got there, but it wasn't sustainable. The same thing in my marriage. I kept begging my ex-husband to work with me instead of just leaving. I could have left, but I stayed so long that it became really dangerous for me. And a lot of us end up in these same cycles and we don't know why. We're absolutely brilliant. And the thing is that it's not just cheating on your spouse or cheating on your partner or craving. Like, I was in sex manias, even though I've never been diagnosed as having a bipolar personality or any type of mental health issue aside from generalized anxiety and complex trauma and adrenal fatigue. I had those same attributes that my father also had as part of his sex manias and his own bipolar, borderline, whatever you want to call it. It's really just unprocessed complex trauma that lives in our body, and our body's trying to seek safety. And when we can't find safety in ourselves because we've never been taught how, we seek safety in others. We outsource safety to others. And a lot of the times it comes up as a sex and love addiction, but it's widely misunderstood because most people think it's just having sex, and it is. That's a component of it. But at the end of the day, it's an attachment wound, and it's how we engage with each other in relationships, whether it's romantically, professionally, in families, or with friends. And I found myself repeating those same cycles of dysfunction, begging, chasing, forcing, trying to extract truth from people that are committed to never sharing their truth because they can't get to their truth themselves. They cannot sit alone by themselves. So they self-abandon and they freeze, or they overfunction, or they travel too much, or they start too many businesses, or whatever that looks like. And a lot of times it looks like success, but in reality, it's self-abandonment. And self-abandonment does not equal success. And honestly, it's one of the ways that I thought I was really successful because I never had a mental health disorder in my family. I thought I got by scot-free, but I didn't. I was in undiagnosed lifelong survival mode, and it destroyed my life. But I also found ways to my life in real life. And that's what we do on this podcast. We our lives in real life together through the art and science of connection. So this past weekend, I went on this date with this man. Now where's my phone? Here's my phone. So we met on Tinder, which I'm just trying to diversify engagement. I can meet people anywhere. And if I meet someone amazing, great. But I'm just trying to look for healthy engagement. So I met this man. He was flying into New York. He actually says on his profile that I will actually speak to you. How on Tinder like is that? I'm not going to just ghost you. I like to engage. And he had an amazing profile and he seemed to be a real person. But when it comes down to it, sometimes people cannot speak their truth. And I had a breakthrough that I realized, like, this isn't just a one-off. This is something that I have consistently worked towards over time with intentional practice. And I've now been able to rewire my nervous system, neuroplasticity, the ability to build new neural pathways over time with intentional practice can change your whole life. But you could only do that from a calm nervous system. You can't do that when you're in a dysregulated state. So that's why it's so important to be able to get to a place of safety in your mind body so that you can change those neural pathways. And I've discussed on previous episodes, like bilateral stimulation, taking those walks can work for you. You can change your life and thoughts through bilateral stimulation using both sides of your brain. There's also like nostril breathing, bilateral stimulation. When we're able to use both sides of our brain, it's really good for people that have a hard time finding peace in their mind body, especially people that think they have ADHD or OCD or any chronic illness. Like I've never been formally diagnosed, but I definitely have OCD, ADD. All of those things are actually attributes of a dysregulated nervous system, but we've given them names as a society because we didn't know what they were. And now that we do, we don't have to call it that. These are characteristics of, attributes of. We also take on attributes of people in our household. So I thought I had an addictive personality. I don't. I take on attributes, a very black and white, over enthusiastic view of life, like my father. And as it turns out, I'm not. And it saved me in a lot of ways, right? Like I never was into oak, which is amazing. It stopped me from really trying all kinds of different drugs. Obviously, I've discussed in other episodes. I call it the sobriety spectrum. I stopped drinking. I smoke pot. I use it medicinally. I've never even taken a Xanax. I've never taken a psychiatric medicine. But this hypervigilance over time, right, in a dysregulated state, being in a hyper arousal state affects your blood sugar. That's why the segmentides of the world work. That's why the Ozempics work, because it messes up every single hormone in your body. But you can also regulate and get it back down to a level that works for you. So when I stopped drinking and I realized my issue was sex and love, it took me many, many years to get to the core of what I wanted to do. But I did take an intentional time off to exit my marriage with integrity, to just stop having those cycles of dysfunction. I was able to then be different and attract better, higher quality people in my life. I don't just any guy that I meet. And, Tinder is a silly place to not want to just, but for me, it's been really beautiful because I've been able to really find ways to engage in a healthy manner with other people when nobody in my entire life has been able to do that. Like I was stuck in a marriage that did not serve me for so many years because I didn't feel safe enough to leave. Meanwhile, I had the power. I was making the money. I was providing insurance. And the longer I stayed, the more dangerous it became. But I didn't know how to get myself out. And the only way I was able to get out was finally through addressing my attachment wound and finding safety in my body and not outsourcing it to others when you're codependent upon somebody else. I've talked about it in other episodes as well. The doctor that I went out with this past weekend, he really viewed it as like, from an addiction standpoint, he was like, how do you feel? Do you find that this is something that you always have to think about? You always have to work on? And I was like, well, the thing is that when you have the ability to regulate your nervous system and not self-abandon and find safety in your body, you don't have to outsource it to addictions. You don't have to outsource it to other people. And that's the disconnect for him because while he is trained from Harvard, right, he understands the mind-body connection and somatics logically, he's never practiced it himself. So he doesn't understand this. And a lot of people don't. And for me, it's really a practice of pause. There's power in the pause. I started to engage with people differently. And it's interesting because this man would have sent me over the edge of sanity. He, first of all, so he says this on his profile. He immediately messages me. He was actually like on the tarmac, ready to leave. And he was texting me and he was like, hey, if I just stop responding, it's because the Wi-Fi is out on this flight. It was terrible weather here. Like, I'm surprised I even got Wi-Fi at all. And I'm not ghosting you. Like, I made a plan for later that evening with him when he landed to have dinner. And it was just really interesting because this was kind of a date that was like more of a serious date that I've had, or so I thought. But as compared to what he actually was able to do from a capacity standpoint, like we could want intellectually to have certain things in our lives or certain people or certain attributes or certain kinds of people. But if we don't have the capacity for it, there's no ability for us to communicate even outwardly. Or if we don't have the capacity, we might be able to regulate and then we could speak our truth. So this man started out really well. He was like, I'm not going to ghost you. And he even says it on his profile. He's like, how on Tinder is that? And he even caveated a bunch of times. He's like, if you're looking for a bad boy, you're looking for someone, a project, that's not me. We should stop talking right now. And I was like, I'm absolutely not looking for that. I just spent the last 20 years in a project and I don't want to raise another man. I want someone to come whole, someone that understands themselves deeply enough so that they can meet me. Because I've done a lot of work to learn how to understand myself and to meet my darkness and to become friends with it. So I no longer make those mistakes any longer. And so he started out the conversation. I told him about the drinking thing, the sex and love stuff. And he started to talk about it from addiction. And I talked about Gabor Mate, who says, don't ask why the addiction, ask why the pain. And when you could get to that root, you don't have to keep making those same cycles over and over and over. And I didn't realize how bad that the sex and love addiction was affecting my life until I stopped, and how deeply it was integrated into every single relationship I had, whether it was my 40-year friendship, or it was my 20-year relationship with my now ex-husband, or it was with my family, that caretaking, that overextending, that proving your worth. In my profession, I had to keep going harder and harder and harder, and I always had to prove my worth. And so anyway, we had a very lovely night. He was very complimentary, both beforehand, in person. He made a lot of promises. He even was like, oh, maybe I'll skip my dinner tomorrow night. Later, I learned that he can't skip the dinner because it's his company. And it's just like those types of things that I now have been able to reframe, right, as attachment wounds, or people might call them love bombing or narcissism, or whatever you want to call this, avoidance, people that can't speak their truth, freeze, whatever that looks like, not knowing your capacity. There's a lot of names that we give nervous system dysregulation in society, but at the end of the day, it's just nervous system dysregulation combined with unhealed attachment wounds. And when we could get to the root of both of those problems, we could solve everything in life. We could have better engagements with people and better outcomes, whether it's personally, professionally, or otherwise. So he and I were talking about that. He asked me a question. I don't know how he framed it, but he was like, how do you feel right now? Like, cause he was like, is this something that like you're going to like relapse? And that's the thing. It's not like, I'm not going to stop practicing this because I am a very disciplined person. I'm not like everybody else, right? I'm very highly motivated, very self-disciplined, very self-motivated, and I can be as restrictive as possible. But as it turns out, it was a lot harder for me to not try to follow up with somebody than, or like chase them or prove my worth, than it was for me to not have sex. And I didn't even know that until I had this opportunity. And like every single person is a learning opportunity if you know how to learn, right? Once in a while you get shown the light in the strangest of places if you look at it right. Well, see that right behind me? I've had that on my wall for years. My sister and I loved that quote, and the Grateful Dead said it best. And the thing is that this engagement would have sent me over the edge of sanity if this had been a year ago, 6 months ago, 3 years ago. I was already over the edge of sanity. That's why I stopped. That's why the powers and the pause. I took a break from engaging with men. I wanted to have a better relationship with self before I engaged with others again. And it's been a beautiful thing. I realized that he had a lot of perfectionism in him. And that's one of the things you have to release when you find nervous system literacy, is that idea of perfectionism, because there's no perfection in life. We're never going to sustain a level of perfection, but we could find progress, right? Progress in work in progress. My former trainer used to always say this to me. And these were things that like I understood logically, but now I understand it somatically. When you could understand things outside the scope of just your brain, but in your body, it's literally life-changing, truly, like absolutely life-changing. And I really believe, I don't believe in panaceas, but it is a panacea for society. So it was interesting. We talked about divorce. I saw the shame that he had with divorce, and how he couldn't logic his way into safety. And even though he is so medically educated by Harvard, and Harvard believes in this at a professional level. So like, it's the thing is unless you understand how to get it out of your body, you never will be able to. And that's something I talked to him about. But it was really interesting because he was talking to me. He was so complimentary. We had a great time. He's like, you look beautiful. You're gorgeous. You're so smart. He's like, you're super smart. And he was like, I'm so proud of you for all the progress you've made. And he's like, I really am. Like, I told him my story and I told him all the things. Like, I shouldn't even be alive right now. Like, I never got any diseases. I never got raped. I never got murdered. I didn't get pregnant. Like, I don't understand how. I made really poor decisions for many, many years. And I put myself in really dangerous situations. Even like I would starve myself, and the first drink I would have in a day would be sometimes like tequila or vodka, coffee, or both. And I was taking like 0 laxatives a night for decades. I told him, I was like, I'm happy I don't walk around with a colostomy bag. Like, I really am saved. Like, there's a lot of guardian angels trying to look out for me. But the thing is that when we have the ability to live in our power, to live in our alignment, to regulate our nervous system, and to really rewire those attachment wounds for success and not take everything personally. It was something I used to internalize other people's failures, other people's capacity limitations, other people's inability to meet me where I am because they couldn't show up for themselves. Hurt people hurt people. That's a mantra that's always been helpful to me, but also it was really helpful to me when I was really learning how to live in my body, and I couldn't even get there yet, but I had to find safety first, right? So that mantra was really helpful. But also, people who can't show up for themselves can't show up for you. And this is really important to remember because a lot of people make a lot of promises that they can't keep. We do it to ourselves, we do it to others, we do it in the workplace, we do it in family life, and we do it professionally, personally, all the ways, right? Romantically. And this man seemed really promising on paper. Now, the thing is like, I don't know anything about him. Anyone can say anything. He can say he went to Harvard. He could say he's wildly successful. I don't know any of those things to be true, but it doesn't matter. I'm not trying to play detective anymore because when you play detective and you're really good at sleuthing and uncovering things and finding out the truth and your intuition always knows best, like my third eye has guided me my whole life. It's true. It has. It's on my bracelet. And, I do things mostly out of intuition my whole life. Like I've literally taught myself how to exist. Like Eminem's like, how the you supposed to grow up when you weren't raised? And so I do everything by intuition. And my intuition was based in a dysregulated nervous system. I was always trying to find safety. So I would always chase, even though I didn't want to. And it was making me feel so bad. And it just kept me stuck in these same cycles of dysfunction. So that's one of the reasons why I started to address my sex and love wound, because the addiction isn't necessarily in the sexual engagements. It's not in the love making. It's not in anything that's physical. It's in how our brains cannot stop looping over the same conversation, over the same moments, over why did this person not choose me? Why are they not responding to me? Why did they not, why were they not able to engage with me in the way that they said they would? Why? So my therapist said this a few weeks ago, and this is something that really resonated with me across myriad places in my life. But she was like, one of the core wounds is people not being who they say they are, whether it was my parents not being able to show up as parents, whether it was my ex-husband not being able to show up as a partner or as a man, whether it was my ex-in-laws who were stealing from us instead of, they should have been the people that cared the most, that wanted to protect us. But instead they took advantage of the most vulnerable situation in the meanest of ways while I got sicker and sicker and sicker. And I kept proving myself more and more. And I kept getting more jobs. And I kept solving their problems instead of making it their problem, saying, hey, this needs to start showing up in our relationship as a partner. And I should have just left. That's what people who have safe families do. They leave. People who know that they have safety in their lives leave. Like there was a girl that I went to sleepaway camp with, and I remember this conversation, and it always stuck with me. And I didn't understand why, but I get it now. And in like 2007, 2008, well, I moved in with my ex in 2007, and there was a lot of things that kept me there for a long time. And one of them was guilt. He guilted me into staying. He's like, I can't afford this apartment without you. I bought this for you. And I'm like, I didn't ask you to do that. You and your parents decided when I was at work that you were going to do this. That has nothing to do with me. But I stayed for a long time out of guilt. And I remember, and it was really bad for me for a lot of different reasons, not to mention like I had a 3-hour round trip commute. It got me really sick, honestly. And it wasn't good because he also couldn't do anything. So I was responsible for everything, whether it was cooking, cleaning, laundry, which we had a laundry room in our building that closed at a certain time. And I got home after that. He worked 6 days a week. He didn't have any friends. So every single thing in a relationship fell on me. Everything, whether it was plans with friends, dinner, decisions, laundry, everything. This man only knew how to work, but he wasn't making money. So what is the point of working if you can't make money, right? And you can't provide insurance, you can't provide for yourself, and you let your parents destroy our lives, and you put your family's needs before our own. And this is an attachment wound that he was taught at a nervous system level. He was conditioned to put other people's needs ahead of his own. And that's what he did in our marriage. And he was never able to show up as a partner. And it's interesting because I was always filling the gap for everybody. The savior and the scapegoat. I was the savior and scapegoat of my family. That's what I am, the entertainer, but I'm also the diplomat. I'm also the problem solver. Again, dysfunctional family roles on the Learn tab on meirl.com. But the thing is that when you have the ability to find safety in yourself, you don't outsource it to others. And that changed the entire way that I engage with humans, whether it's romantic, personal, friendship, family, and otherwise. And that has been the most transformative moment in my life, is learning to take that pause. There's power in the pause, right? So this man said all these wonderful things. We had a great time. We ended the date he was future tripping. He started to ask me about kids. He's like, do you want kids? And I was not prepared for for that conversation because I decided a while ago that, I'd be a great stepmom, a wonderful bonus mom. Everybody agrees, but I don't want to procreate any longer because number one, I'm 43. Number two, I don't want to put that stress on my body and my nervous system. So I told him like it would have to be like the absolute right situation. But the longer I thought about that afterwards, I was like, that's not the answer anymore. Like I wanted kids so badly, but I refused to bring children into a dysfunctional situation. And that's a blessing and a curse, right? Of being in lifelong undiagnosed survival mode because I thought like a 5-year-old my whole life. And it was protecting me from bringing children into something that like did not work. And I knew it didn't work because I found myself having the same arguments with my now ex-husband that my parents did. And it scared me as a child. And I was like, I'm not going to put another child through this. So that's a blessing and a curse. But I got to the point where, and I stayed for a really long time because I couldn't imagine having children with anybody else because we were trauma bonded. We had the same attachment wound, but we didn't know it because they were the attachment wounds that attract each other, right? Like his freeze was attracted to my hypervigilance and my hyper arousal. And I was able to solve every single problem for us. So he didn't have to solve anything. And he was able to abdicate responsibility across every facet of his life, whether it was at his job where he let his parents make all his decisions. He still does. He's a 40-something-year-old man. And it's destroyed his life and he still doesn't do anything about it. But I got myself out of it. So this man the other night seemed wonderful on paper. He said all the right things. He claimed to be all these things. And when we left that evening, he wrote me some of the nicest messages. He was asking real questions. He was asking about sex and love addiction. I know he was concerned about cheating. He was concerned about having a sexless relationship. As am I. I don't want to have a sexless relationship. That's why I stopped, right? I took that pause. There's power in the pause. I rewired my nervous system through intentional practice. Neuroplasticity is sexy. And I'm not going to have a sexist relationship, but I need a partner that also has the same level of healing or is committed to finding that. It's also why I started to explore Tantra, because Tantra has practices that allow you to keep the romance alive. Because actually, something that he said from the beginning that I think is so interesting. He said great things happen quickly because we'd met and we really vibed and he was like, wow, we vibed. We couldn't stop talking. I never had that happen before. And I was like, that happens to me all the time. Like I could talk to anybody, but it doesn't mean I feel a romantic engagement with you. But there was like there was like a little connection. Like I'm not saying it was like the strongest connection ever for me, but there was enough. And it was more than I had felt with other people in the last dating, right? Like, but I knew we were misaligned from the beginning because he said great things happen quickly. And I was like, no, it's actually Seek Parvis Magna, greatness from small beginnings. Great things don't happen quickly. And I mean, they do, but it doesn't have to feel intense. It doesn't have to feel like a trauma bond. It doesn't have to be like this thing that you can't control. That's not what love should feel like. Love should feel like a slow burn. That's why I loved the idea of Tantra, not the performative Tantra that a lot of people talk about and all the things that's all over the internet and all over every social media, but the actual practice, right, of Tantra is beautiful. And the slow burn, the not immediacy, being able to actually let things evolve naturally and not feel that intense connection is what we should all seek. And so when he said great things happen quickly, I told him seek Parvis Magna, greatness from small beginnings. And I could just tell we were misaligned, right? In that fundamental idea that things need to happen quickly because they don't. And when you're desperate, you want things to happen quickly. But when you are aligned and you actually want something to last, you know that it's a slow burn and it's not something that you just can't live without each other. It doesn't feel like a sacred union. Sacred unions are attachment wounds, honestly. And all the times that I was like, oh my gosh, this is destined in the stars, attachment wounds. So these are just things to think about, right? Like the idea of the runner and the chaser, those are attachment wounds. It's not magical. There's nothing magical about it. Those are attachment wounds. And when you could heal your attachment wounds, you don't have to chase. You don't have a runner. You don't have that intense feeling, right? Like that is not what I'm looking for. I want a mutual attraction. I want some banter. I want some good connection. And there was a spark there for us. But for me, it didn't go further than that. And I was willing to explore it, right? To see if it would grow over time. But he wanted that intensity. He wants that to make him feel safe that his next relationship isn't going to end up sexless again. He doesn't want a roommate and nobody does. But you have to work towards finding safety in yourself first, right? And you can't overpromise because then you lead people on. And I know he didn't want to do that. And I could have easily, oh, he's busy. Oh, he's in town for work. He's tired. He's changing hotels, whatever I wanted to say to make myself feel better. But guess what? When you can actually find safety in your body, you don't need to find it in others. And that is how you break those cycles of dysfunction and stop chasing and start attracting. But this man got really excited because apparently he never finds people that he wants to talk to, let alone meet up with. And he has been dating for a while. And so he was really excited about that when he was on the plane. And he even messaged me when the Wi-Fi came on for a second, but then it went off. And it was so interesting because it also showed me, like, I had a few dates scheduled that I canceled last week for a few reasons. One, I saw some marks on this guy's lips and I was like, I don't need your HPV. I'm good. Like, I really will take that into account. Just like I said a few weeks ago, like, I don't want to share my joint with just anybody anymore. I don't want your diseases. I've been able to, I don't know how, avoid diseases, and I don't want to catch it now. That's another reason why I stayed in my marriage for a long time, because for a while I didn't feel good enough in my body before I got married. I couldn't imagine anybody even seeing me naked. That kept me trapped for a long time. Not wanting to get diseases, even though I ended up making the worst decisions ever, kept me trapped for a long time. So a main characteristic of complex trauma, if you don't know what it is feeling trapped. But what's the antidote to feeling trapped? Is actually agency, the ability to feel like you're in power of your own decisions. And that's literally one of the most powerful things you could feel in the world. Because as I've said before, you could have clarity, you could have discernment, you could have calmness, but until you have agency, agency is the most powerful thing because you don't stay trapped anymore. You could speak your truth. You could choose to not respond. You could choose to do something else with that energy in your body. You could choose to reframe. You could choose to do literally anything besides what you would have done before. And if you keep showing your nervous system different experiences over and over and over again, you will get different results over time. And that's just the truth. So he and I had a great time. We talked a lot before. In fact, we were talking so much that, like, once he landed, we were making plans. He was very communicative. And this is how I feel like it always starts with these avoidant men that I meet, that they always end up being so communicative in the beginning. And then as soon as there's an opportunity for some type of vulnerability, or they can't speak, or I don't know what happens, they can't speak at all. And the old me used to chase, whether it was personally, professionally, in friendship. That's how I ended up on my 40-year friendship that I had to end. These are the same avoidance patterns, the same people that can't communicate, right? And it doesn't make them bad. It just makes them dysregulated, and it makes them not able to speak their truth, and it keeps them frozen, or it keeps them from actually doing what they want, which is to love other people. And that's what we all want. We all want safety. It's a core need in our bodies. It's a motivating factor. It drives every unconscious decision, is safety. And it's literally at a DNA level. That's what drives us all. So he and I ended up having a lot of conversations, and before he was on the plane, when he got here. And at one point I was like, hey, like, if we don't stop talking right now, like, I'm going to be late to meet you at 9 p.m. When I was like, let's do 9, let's give you some time to get into New York. Like, it was crazy weather. And he's like, okay, don't respond to anything after whatever I say. And I was like, okay. It was interesting because I learned a lot from him as a professional, but also as a person. And it's interesting to see, like, I never really dated as a person. Like, I was never fully available. So now that I'm available, I can make better decisions now. I don't have to keep putting myself in those same situations. I ended up realizing that this man was avoidant, just like all the other men that I've met, but he presented differently. He presented like he could communicate. He presented like he wanted to see me again. He made all these promises. I didn't ask for any of this. First of all I wanted was a healthy engagement. Like, I was happy we went to dinner. Would I have chosen a different place? Yes. Did I think it was that great? No. But I was happy to be there. I was happy to have the conversation, to speak to him. And in the past, I would have internalized all of this as my fault. But now, when I'm able to reframe pain, right, and really shame, I could reclaim my power. And I don't have to get stuck in those same cycles. I don't have to keep chasing people. I don't have to keep proving my worth. I don't have to keep having those same conversations that never go anywhere, right? Like, one of the first songs that my body internalized as a child was, every time you go away, you take a piece of me with you. And if you listen to that song, it's actually about a dysfunctional relationship. And, I can't go on saying the same things. Can't you see? We got everything going on and on and on. Every time you go away, you take a piece of me with you. I'm not going to make you listen to that right now. My voice is like tired because I've been talking a lot. And actually, having a hoarse voice, I used to lose my voice all the time before I was being treated for this, is because of thyroid dysfunction. So it didn't matter what I did. If I was screaming, if I was just speaking at a normal tone, I would lose my voice all the time. And it didn't make sense. And I finally understood why. So when I lose my voice more than I should, it's my cue. It's my understanding now in my body to rest more, right? To take a break. There's power in the pause. You pause in many different ways. And so anyway, we had a great night, and it was interesting because I took note, right? Like, it's not about being judgmental, it's about being curious. And he even said it. He's like, you have extreme pattern literacy, like you have a crazy pattern recognition. And I was like, yes. So he knows I'm smart. He knew I was brilliant. Like, he said it in front of me. He's like, you're incredible. Like, he's like, you're super interesting. You're super smart. I love that. You're gorgeous. You're beautiful. He's like, it's a dangerous combo, LOL. And I know that also, like, there was a fear inside of him that I would relapse, quote unquote, and cheat on him. But I'm not a cheater. Even my ex-husband knew I wasn't a cheater. That's why he knew that this situation wasn't good. He couldn't fix it, right? He's frozen, but he also knew that it wasn't my fault because I'm not a cheater. And in living in alignment, living in integrity, living with a regulated nervous system, I'm not going to cheat on people, right? That's just not who I am. And we wouldn't want to do these things to each other if we could regulate our nervous systems and we could find safety in ourselves, right? And we could have those harder conversations. Like, I used to motivate my ex, what I thought was motivation, but it was actually terrifying him. And it was just exacerbating the situation. And we're going to talk about that in a different episode too. But I started to practice what I preach. And I decided not to yell at my husband into performance, but to try to create conditions of safety. And whether or not that goes anywhere, that's not my responsibility. He needs to find safety in himself, but I'm not going to be an external factor any longer that prolongs dysfunction by making him feel unsafe in our engagements, whether that's through words, whether that's through actions, right? Like, I'm going to create conditions of safety in myself and others. That's what we do. That's co-regulation, right? It's beautiful. But I used to want to prove my worth over and over again. So anyway, I got home that night, and I'm going to tell you about our conversation. I'm going to tell you what happened the next day and how I changed 40 years plus of begging people to be there for me, to be who they say they are, to make good on the promises that they initiated. Like, I didn't initiate any of this. All I wanted was a night that was respectful. And if it went somewhere romantic, great. But that was not what I was looking for. And so I said, thank you so much for the dinner. I had a great time. And we talked about whatever. And he goes, I said, what I did say to him, because he was like, oh, you're like dating a lot. And I'm like, yeah, but like, I'm not finding connection with these people. Like, I have had some of the most vulnerable dates with men that tell me their life stories, the deepest wounds in their lives. And we're able to reframe it a little bit. And I give them a little bit of insight, and I'm able to help them through those moments without shame, right? Without feeling that they're failures, and saying like, hey, think about it this way. So it's been really beautiful. And it's been also beautiful getting to know these people without having this sex addiction, right? Like, I want your sex. I want your love. Like, George Michael's I Want Your Sex rings in my ears. Like, it's literally in my unconscious. And I've had to work hard, so hard, to change my unconscious. And that's the only way you could do that is through building new neural pathways over time with intentional practice, but having an understanding of your nervous system and what impacts your nervous system, what conversations, what people, what stimuli, right? And then being able to process that and choose something different next time, but only when you're in a place of regulation. Nothing good happens in dysregulation. And I said something like, I will say, of all my dates with that disaster, you were my favorite. He's like, yeah, I really like you. You're super interesting and you're gorgeous, dangerous combo, LOL. And I said, very humble man you are. And I said, like, I wouldn't have mentioned the Harvard thing if I had known he went to Harvard Medical School. I mean, I would have mentioned it in the context of my dad and their certificate, but I wouldn't have like started with that. And he's like, very funny. I wouldn't have mentioned it either. That's the funny thing. And he's like, I'm pretty low key, which I liked about him because he wasn't like the typical douchebag, right? Like, I liked him a lot. He seemed cool. Was I attracted to him? I don't know. I was trying to figure that out. Like, we weren't together enough for me to figure that out. I felt there were moments that I felt like I could like kiss him, right? But then there were moments that I was like, I don't know. I also am pretty sure he wasn't the age he says he is. I'm like just convinced that there was something there that I'm just not privy to. And that's fine. It's not my responsibility to seek out truth in others any longer. I'm taking my learnings and I'm moving forward. So I'm keeping, one foot in the present and one foot with my learnings in the past, but I'm not stuck there anymore. It's not going to prevent me from meeting people, whereas it would have literally destroyed my mental health if this series of events occurred. So I'm out with this like beautiful man. He is Harvard educated. He's a doctor. I've always had fantasies about doctors. I didn't even tell him that. I didn't even want to go there. And he was very flirty from the beginning. I could tell he was like, he wants a sexual relationship. not like a one night stand, but he wants a relationship that has a spark. And I was like, we all do, especially those of us that have had divorces, that have had sexless relationships. When you've been through that, it can make you feel so alone. Like you could feel lonely, but when you're sitting next to someone on the sofa and you still feel lonely, that's the most alone that you could feel in this world. And everyone's like, oh, you're married. I'm like, do you know what I'm married to though? I feel the most alone when I'm with somebody. So imagine how lonely people feel when they're in these marriages and they just seek external safety by self-abandoning, by throw themselves into work. And it could look really, really successful. Like he sold a company since getting divorced 4 years ago. He sold a company 2 years ago. Great. But has he spent any time to rewire his nervous system, to address his attachment wounds, to really go deep on his contributions into this marriage that he feels he worked really hard towards, and it still came up as a failure to him, right? His body reads it in shame as failure. And I was trying to explain to him that it's not a failure, that these are just deep-seated nervous system wounds that unless two people are willing to address, you're never going to be able to affect change in another person unless you're willing to do the deep work yourself. And um and he's like, you're super smart too. I like that. And then I said something like, thank you. Intelligence is a turn on for me. And he's like, good. I like the idea of turning you on. And we were talking about whatever. And again, I didn't like go super flirty with that because I don't want to lead with sex anymore. Like that's just not my thing. Now, I'm also like, and I'll tell you how this all transpired and like what I would have done and the things I did. I'm also a little bit more reticent when I'm meeting people who are so overly complimentary, so overly like, before I even knew what love bombing was, like I'm still not going to be like, you're so hot, you're so this, you're so that. That's just not in my, like, I'm a little bit more reserved and people don't think that about me. But then that reservedness sometimes with my head afterwards, if this exact situation happened before I was able to address my attachment wounds. And there's so many different attachment styles. And as I said in previous episodes and this one, we aren't always stuck in one attachment style. Different people can bring out different attachment wounds for us, right? We're agile as a species. The vagus nerve to wander is based on that. So we're wanderers as people, right? As humans, as human beings, we are wanderers. We're hunters. We're gatherers. It lives in our DNA. So we went back and forth a few times, and he said, I like a lot about you, but what I like the most is how you immerse yourself into everything, how you give everything 150%. Such an amazing trait. He goes, you look beautiful tonight. Love that outfit. And I said, oh, thank you. That's a very kind compliment. I can't fake enthusiasm. And which is true. And we were going back and forth about like an inside joke. We ended up sending a few voice messages and he's like, headed to bed. Hope to see you soon with like kiss face. And we made plans to see each other again, whether it was on this trip or another one, because he was only going to be staying here till Tuesday, which is today actually. And this was Saturday night into Sunday. So normally I wouldn't have texted the next day in my femininity, in my receiving mode, but this wasn't about a romantic engagement. We had left it. And I said something like, I left him a voice message about what we were talking about. Then I said, sweet dreams. And I'd love to see you again soon too. And I didn't use the commas, like it was 2 a.m. It was a long night. It was a long day. And I had been out, like I'd had a few days in a row that were long and I'd planned on working that night. Like I was intentionally trying not to have a date that night because I wanted to work. But I actually, I met him, we really vibed. I was like, let's do it. Like it felt like such a flow. It didn't feel like a force. And I was excited about that. So I texted him. I woke up early on Sunday. I felt really happy. I was like, cool. I met this amazing guy. On paper, he sounds amazing. He was respectful. He was nice. He seemed to understand me more than other people do. And I wrote him a message about Gabor Mate because he wasn't familiar with Gabor Mate. Because like I said, he's somatically trained, but he's not trauma informed. And that's what we really need as a society is somatics and trauma informed. Because when we could address things at a nervous system literacy, attachment wound lens, we won't get stuck in those same cycles of dysfunction, whether it's proving ourselves in work and trying to force things, even though people are working against us, or romantic friendships with family, et cetera, with our children, right? We don't have to destroy our children. We can love our children. We don't have to make our children's lives terrible because of our own unhealed attachment wounds. Like I know my mom didn't want to be abusive. It took me a really long time to understand like I was neglected and abused. I've processed a lot. I also processed the grief of not having children. And this man hasn't. And he is looking for someone who wants children. And like he didn't make that clear to me from the beginning. And when he said that, I just saw the wound. I saw the grief. I saw the shame. I saw the disappointment. I saw the, all of the things that he wanted. And I said to him, I'm like, you should be with someone that wants to have kids. Like, I don't not want to have kids, but I want to be a bonus mom. I want to be someone that comes in and I can join a family. I can't produce a family at this point. Like, I'm just not going to. I'm not going to do that to my body. My body can't take that level of stress anymore. And it's just not what I want to do. But he was willing to be with somebody who he said if it was the right situation that didn't want kids. And, part of my goal has always been a pediatric complex trauma nonprofit. So I will have some children in my life, whether they're my neighbors, whether they're my friends' kids, whether they're bonus kids, whether I joined an Insta family, right? I've always joked about that because everyone's like, you steal other people's kids, you love kids. Like, I love kids. I love kids and kids love me, even though I'm so scary. That's actually from Clifford. It's very funny, and it's also true. Like, I terrify a lot of people, but a lot of men. And the kids love me. Like, I love kids too. Like, that day, I saw one of my neighbors who went to the beach for the first time as like a 2-year-old, and I asked her, I was like, "How was the beach? How was it?" And I was like, "What's your favorite part?" And like, I just love kids. Like, I think like a child still, and it allows me to relate to children a lot deeper in a very normal way than most adults, right? And I create conditions of safety without even knowing it. I didn't even know what conditions of safety were, but I allow kids to be themselves, and they love that. They really do love me. So it's not that I was born to be a mom, but I wasn't born to produce my own children at this point. I would have. That's why I stayed with my ex for many years, but I was clear with him. Like, I tried to be as clear as possible that it would have to be the right situation. And he also told me that he has 9 months left on the contract with the company that acquired his business. And I was like, "So you're going to renew it?" He's like, "I don't know." So again, that's his own journey. This is a first date. I didn't even know if I was attracted to this man yet. I was just getting to know him, but he was like future tripping. And those are the things that with our heads, right? When we think someone is qualifying us or figuring out, like, will this person be a good partner? Do they want the same things as me? So I wrote him a text the next morning after, his kiss, like, "I hope to see you soon." Like, yeah, I thought I was going to see him again, right? So I said, "Morning, so happy with the opportunity to cross paths. This is da da da. This is Gabor Mate." I sent him the link, and I could just tell by his response that something had shifted. And it was just like very chill. He goes, "Thank you," with a bunch of exclamation points. No, nothing. And then I said, "Did you get some rest?" Because I wanted to just test the waters. And he goes, "Yeah, though, not enough. Haha. How about you?" And I wrote him like a lengthy message, and it was unread. And the last time we read that was 3:51 on Sunday. And today is Tuesday, and I've not heard back from him. And the thing is that there was a lot of things that I don't know, maybe he might not have even gone to Harvard. A lot of people could say whatever they want. He also didn't have, after flying across the country for the second time that week, he also didn't have his license with him when we were trying to go to a bar, and they went to card him, and he's like a 50-something-year-old man, and he didn't have his license. And I happen to have mine, thank God, because I don't always. And I was able to get us in, but like, and I don't even drink anymore. But it was interesting because when you don't have a trauma bond with someone, like a lot of the men that I went out with, I would have trauma bonded with in the past. It would have been like, "Oh, they've been through similar things," or "I need to save them. I need to help them through their lives." And I would have wanted to be of use to them, right? Like, I had to prove my worth. I would think that, "Oh, you've been through the same things as I have. Let's be together. We could grow together. We could heal each other." But that's not what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to come whole. We're supposed to find safety in ourselves so then we can be better partners to others. We can be better partners to ourselves first, though. Mask on first. It's a big thing. And, you know, the song "I Want Your Sex, I Want Your Love," like it lives in my nervous system. Just like every time you go away, you take a piece of me with you. And we'll go into Only Music Can Save Us in future episodes, but this is ingrained in my psyche. And in my head, it's always, "I tell you that I love you, but you still say no." And I have a whole comedy routine around it. You'll catch me one day, catch me outside doing the comedy routine. I did it on a whim. I wrote it on a whim, and I performed it in front of my husband in 2023 before I then left him that night to go further deepen my attachment wound. And that engagement was actually like the aha moment that I realized that I had to address my sex and love issues. And not that moment, but like those series of events. And even in that moment when I was performing this for my ex-husband, like joking, because I just started to write it while I think I was like organizing my closet in February of 23, when I just had that breakthrough, like that allowed me the divine realization that allowed me to actually get in my body for the first time. It was about protection, about not wanting to hurt him, but also not wanting to put myself in these situations that were just so painful. I couldn't keep putting myself out there and keep getting hurt. And there was a lot of things that I wasn't sure if this man was real or not. Like, but the thing is it doesn't matter. I don't have to dig deep into him. I don't have to be an investigator. I don't have to be sleuthing. There was a lot of things that I liked about him too. But the thing is, he was so generous with his compliments. He seems so genuine as a person. He seemed so normal. He seemed like someone I would want to build something with, but he can't communicate. And I used to internalize that. And I used to find safety in chasing and proving my worth. And there were things I wanted to talk to him about. We talked about doing business potentially together, whether now or once he is done with his current contract. We talked about me doing workshops for his company because like he's like you're going to be so successful at this. He's like you're incredibly engaging and brilliant and like people really need this. And I was like, hire me for your company because like what would be better than a Harvard educated doctor validating that what I'm doing in market is useful, right? If he hires me for his business. And he was like, you're right. When he didn't respond at 3:51 and it was on red, I was like, this isn't going to go well. Cause I could just tell by his non-engaging response. Like I'm really good, right, at reading other people's mixed signals. And I used to override those things in my body and try to push harder and force instead of flow. And I thought about, like, in fact, I talked to ChatGPT before I realized that like he really wasn't going to respond. But I talked to ChatGPT about something else. And then I started to mention this. And ChatGPT is not trauma informed, does not understand about attachment wounds, and was like, oh, he's busy. He's overwhelmed by his feelings. He was too vulnerable last night. And that's what ChatGPT thinks because ChatGPT is trained by humans, but humans that are not trauma informed, humans that are not nervous system literate, humans that have never dealt with their attachment wounds. And I was like, in the middle of it, I was like, this is an attachment wound. And this used to keep me stuck in those cycles of performing over and over and over. I would want to text him more like, what happened? I don't get it. We made plans to hang out again. I know it was only one time, but like he was the one that seemed so into me and he seemed so into this. He was so excited before I even met him, before, during, after. And then I don't know what happened from going to bed to the next morning. He sounded tired. He had a long day, but like, I don't need to know. I don't need to chase it. I don't need to prove my worth. I don't need to say, by the way, I also, like a former iteration of myself would have been like, I have fantasies about doctors. That would have like, I thought, oh, come back. I'll tease you. Because there were things I never got to say, right? Conversations kill. Like it's about the things that are left unsaid in a lot of these engagements when men are over communicative, when they're love bomb, not just men, but women too. Women do this also. My ex-in-laws love bombed me. They literally made me think that they were incredible and I could go to nobody else for safety. That's a love bombing thing. They were so nice at first. And then they just, it's a control power move, right? When you want to control other people, you love bomb them. And it's actually outsourcing safety because if you can't control your life, you try to control others. And a lot of this stems from nervous system wounds, right? And I was able to see my dysfunction that came from my mom who would, scapegoat savor me, telling me to do something. And then as soon as I did it and I did it well, she got angry at me. There's an Eminem line. My dad actually said, he's like, this is your mother in 2000. And it took me years to realize it, but it was like, shut up, give me your hands and feet. I said, shut up when I'm talking to you. You hear me? Answer me. And that's what it was like living with my mom. My dad like highlighted that to me in that song when I was learning how to drive in the 2000s. And it stuck with me because as I learned about attachment wounds and nervous system literacy, I was like, oh my gosh, that's my core attachment wound is the mixed signals. And this is what this is. It's mixed signals. It's someone going all in, right? And then retracting for safety. And that's about them. That's not about me. I didn't do anything besides go to sleep. I'm exactly the same person as I was last night. But now he can't communicate to me, this man. And that would have literally lit off a flame in my body that made me press harder and try to find out what's wrong with him. And I would have gone through it in my head and I would have had all of these things like literally going over and over and over, looping in my brain. Like, should I have said this? Maybe I shouldn't have said that. Maybe I should tell him this, or also tell him, by the way, like maybe we shouldn't date, but will you work with me? Let's do that. And by the way, I have a whole roster of nice Jewish girls that want to have children right now with someone like you. But guess what? You don't have access to them now. And also, by the way, none of them are as cool as me. There's a reason they're still single. No offense, y'all. But a lot of people need to do their own attachment wound work. And I find that in a lot of the women that I have engaged with over my life get so desperate when they want to have kids. And so do men. And like, I wasn't desperate. I'm not desperate. I'm not making decisions out of desperation. I'm not chasing this man. I'm not trying to prove my worth. So that was Sunday. And I woke up the next day, Monday, with my jaw hurting. And instead of texting him, like, hey, bro, like, what's going on? Like, I don't get it. You know, we had such a great night. You said this, this, and this. You made it seem like you were into me. You wanted to move forward. I just let it be, because silence is power. There's power in the pause. And it's the truth. And that's that pause, when you could regulate, you could become more in alignment. You could work through those pain in your body so it doesn't actually extrapolate further. It doesn't proliferate throughout your body, right? It doesn't get you sicker. You don't keep doing the same things that make you feel shitty over and over and over again. So on the next episode, we're going to talk about how I worked through it, because I stopped chasing, right? And I started attracting, and I was ready to receive and be received. I am not at all looking for someone to save me, but I am looking for a partner, and I am looking for someone to build with, right? And I want all of it. I want sex, I want love, I want business, I want everything, right? And I don't have to choose anymore. I don't have to compartmentalize or bifurcate parts of my life in order to find safety. I could find wholeness in myself, and I don't have to chase it or seek it in others. And I wrote him back. He never responded. Guess what? I don't care. Bye. See ya. But like, that's the truth. And my body responded though, and I worked through it differently. So stay tuned to the next episode to learn how I worked through it, and how nervous system literacy will help save your relationships with yourself first, so that you can then be a better partner to others, whether it's personal, professional, in a family, with your friends, or just engaging with people in society. Let's do the things we say we want to do. Let's live in integrity. Let's live in alignment. Let's live in safety, because safety is sexy, and safety is the only way that we could have any success in our lives or affect any type of change. Don't be a Richard and join us for the next episode. Just chill to the next episode. Thank you so much for watching the Me IRL pod with your host, Lauren Friedman, not another healing asshole. If you want to support the mission and the project and this channel, the quickest way to do that is to hit the subscribe button. Also, if you're so inclined, please like, share, and comment any thoughts in the comments below. I will personally be responding to them. And if any of the products that I showcase or wear or speak about are interesting to you, please don't forget to shop them in the links above, including but not limited to merch with the perp, as well as all of my affiliate products, including Camuso Design, Recess, Routine, Built, as well as Equip, and more. Always adding more each day to better ourselves, because together we rise from me to me IRL. I just want to share some of the brand partners that really help save my sanity, help my nervous system, and just keep me sane and from losing my mind each day. So first is Camuso. Camuso is a breathing tool that helps you regulate your nervous system in real time. And before we dive in, I'd like to do a little breathwork exercise together. So I like to do a 4-4-8 breath. And what you do is you inhale for 4, you hold for 4, and then you exhale slowly for 8. And that is where the magic happens. And that is where your heart rate gets reduced, your blood pressure gets reduced, your sanity comes back, your will to live, and your body literally can get regulated from a state of dysregulation to a state of regulation in real time. So let's do it together. Literally magic. Like you could feel the difference. You can literally feel the shift. That's why it's called the Camuso shift. The next thing is Quit protein bars with 20 grams of grass-fed protein, as well as Built protein bars with 17 to 20 grams of protein as well. That has whey protein in it. Both of those things help you stay regulated. They keep you fuller. They help build amino acids, which keeps your brain from having brain fog. It helps you think clearer, and it just helps you stay saner. The next thing that I'm absolutely obsessed with is morning routine. Morning routine is an electrolyte that is only 3 ingredients. It's literally apple cider vinegar, organic lemon, and sea salt. It's so delicious. And it's literally my favorite way to hydrate. I'm a wateraholic. I carry around a 64-ounce water bottle just for fun. I've been drinking water my whole life, and I stopped drinking a few years ago, which is why I love Recess as well. for the sobriety spectrum drinks. But literally all of these things keep us regulated, they keep us hydrated, they keep us sane, they keep us full, and they just keep us from losing our minds. So that's what I'm doing. You can find all the links to buy those products in the links above.